Open any internet browser and search for water damage to find a wall of panic. Headlines scream about toxic mold, neurotoxicity, and lethal spores. When you set aside the sensationalism and examine the peer-reviewed medical data, a very different picture emerges. This creates a friction point in the remediation industry, the gap between a client's fear of the unknown and what science actually proves. Our standard is rooted in objective, evidence-based environmental restoration. We do not leverage fear. Operating a remediation business on public anxiety is poor science. It is a massive professional liability. Texas law strictly governs how we understand these risks. Texas Administrative Code Section 78.68 sets the legally binding operational baseline for the entire industry. The code explicitly requires that all mold assessment training regarding health effects must be developed in consultation with state professional associations, including at least one representing physicians. We do not rely on an internet search for definitions of mold hazards. We are bound to use the established medical consensus. This briefing covers proven health effects, real biological vectors, and ethical client communication. Mastering these areas separates legally compliant professionals from contractors operating on pseudoscience. The definitive baseline for this consensus comes from the Institute of Medicine at the National Academy of Sciences. They conducted a comprehensive review of the health effects associated with damp indoor spaces. Their 380-page report drew a distinct line. While mold is linked to allergies and upper respiratory problems like asthma, no evidence links it to cancer, chronic fatigue, or neuropsychiatric disorders. The American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine corroborates this. They issued an evidence-based statement reviewing the specific claims around building-related symptoms. Their conclusion is direct. Current scientific evidence does not support the proposition that human health has been adversely affected by inhaled mycotoxins in the home, school, or office environment. Furthermore, the statement emphasizes that the phrase toxic mold is scientifically meaningless, noting that we do not even know what would constitute a toxic dose of inhaled mold in humans. The Texas Medical Association aligns with this, affirming that adverse health effects from inhaling mold spores are not supported by available peer-reviewed medical literature. Certain fungi do produce poisonous substances called mycotoxins. However, the standard level of exposure in a typical water-damaged building does not equate to a systemic toxic dose. The proven risk is isolated primarily to sensitized individuals, people with pre-existing conditions like allergies or asthma, who react to the airborne particulate. Even regarding Stachybotrys, the heavily publicized black mold, extensive literature reviews show that a causal relationship has never been established between indoor exposure to this specific strain and serious building-related illness. Professionals must discard the toxic mold myth entirely and focus exclusively on scientifically proven biological vectors. If we eliminate mycotoxin poisoning from our assessment, we can identify the biological hazards that actually cause human irritation. The first primary vector is the allergen itself. When mold colonizes a surface, it reproduces by releasing microscopic spores that easily become airborne and circulate. When occupants inhale these spores, they can undergo sensitization. A single or repeated exposure to these allergens results in the individual becoming hypersensitive, triggering allergic reactions. This presentation slide identifies the second major vector, Microbial Volatile Organic Compounds, or mVOCs. These are chemical gases produced by the mold during its growth cycle, responsible for the strong, musty odor. Exposure to these gases in damp buildings is linked to temporary symptoms, including headaches, severe nasal irritation, dizziness, and nausea. Clinical research on the exact health effects of mVOCs is still in its early stages. These are localized, temporary respiratory irritants, distinct from severe claims of systemic poisoning. Understanding these exact airborne vectors dictates our safety response. It forms the baseline for designing effective worker respiratory protection plans and selecting the correct PPE. Correctly identifying the hazard allows you to deploy a targeted, proportional safety protocol, replacing panic with precision. There is a third biological vector to account for, glucans. These are small fragments of the fungal cell walls themselves. When a mold colony dries out or is physically disturbed during the remediation process, these tiny pieces become airborne. Inhaling them can cause direct inflammatory reactions in the lungs and airways. Exposure to extremely high levels of glucans and dust can lead to a flu-like condition known as organic dust toxic syndrome. However, the data shows this syndrome is primarily noted in heavy agricultural and manufacturing settings. There is no current data showing this level of risk for typical mold remediation workers. This brings us to the macro level. The Texas Department of State Health Services outlines the common sense approach displayed here. It establishes that small amounts of mold growth present minimal health risks for most people. The prescribed solution is straightforward. Find and fix the underlying moisture problem and clean up the existing mold quickly. Conversely, large areas of mold growth present a statistically higher risk of heavy exposure and adverse health effects for some individuals. A large area of mold is primarily an indicator of extensive moisture intrusion. That necessitates a heavier response, requiring extensive containment and remediation measures to protect both workers and occupants. The physical scale of the moisture problem, not the fear of encountering a specific toxic strain, defines the severity of your remediation protocol. This medical data governs the legal and ethical conduct of every Texas mold professional. Section 295.304 of the Texas Rules outlines the code of ethics professionals must follow. Subsection 11 is clear: do not make false or misleading claims. Subsection 12 explicitly prohibits making representations designed to take advantage of the fears or emotions of the public. Weaponizing the toxic mold myth to secure a contract is a direct violation of state credentialing. This establishes an absolute golden rule for client interaction during any field assessment or remediation project. Look at this directive from the Department of State Health Services. Do not give medical advice under any circumstances. If a client expresses concerns about symptoms, your only authorized response is instructing them to consult a qualified healthcare provider. Keep the boundaries of your profession clear. Environmental consultants diagnose and treat buildings. Doctors diagnose and treat bodies. Our operational mission remains straightforward. Identify the exact source of the moisture intrusion, execute the physical cleanup protocol safely, and verify clearance testing. True professional authority does not come from fear-mongering. It comes from disciplined, objective science